Buenas tardes, chicos. Soy Profe Young y están mirando el video lección sobre el pretérito. So let's begin. El pretérito is how we talk about the past in español. Here's a little quote to help us get started. The past is good to learn from, but not to live in. Good words to live by. So el pretérito is the past, one of two past tenses in Spanish. As you can see, there are two past tenses in Spanish. The other one is called the imperfecto. We're going to be learning about that one a little later on. So the pretérito is used to describe specific actions that began and ended in the past, not things that were continuing on. This tense is very, very common to describe what you did yesterday, earlier today, a week ago, or even one time. Something you did once, a long time ago. So some words you might need there might be like yesterday in Spanish is ayer. You're going to see that's really common. Last night is anoche. And what else? Some other things like esta mañana would be this morning, etc. There's a lot more ways we could go, but those are some places to start. Okay. What it is not used for is general characteristics of the past or repeated action. That's the other past tense. Okay, let's get into it. So just like all verb tenses that you learned in the past and that you're learning in Spanish, there is conjugation involved. And you're always going to see little charts like this that describe how you do AR, ER, and IR verbs. So let's jump right in. In el pretérito, this is the past tense. You would take off your AR and you put on these forms. Haste, o, amos, and aron. I want you to pay particular attention to the accents, those acentos. There's one over the yo form and over the el, ella, usted form. So for example, if you're confused about how that would form, you'd be something like hablar would go to something like yo hablé. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. This is the first section, is the AR, ER, and IR conjugations. So haste, o, amos, aron. ER verbs are very similar, and you can see the patterns in their endings. So it'd be like a verb like comer, ER verbs. Iste, yo, imos, and ieron. So as a verb comer, you would take off the ER, and you would put on the endings. You say tú comiste, you ate. IR verbs are the exact same if you look at the ER verbs, and IR verbs are identical in their endings, which is kind of nice. So this would be something like escribir. You take off the IR and you put on the right end. Escribí, escribiste, escribió, escribimos, escribieron. So we could say ellos escribieron. Right? As an example. So here's a whole bunch of examples for you to take a look at, so that you're not totally just sitting with this abstract idea about haste, o, amos, aron, iste, yo, imos, ieron, etc. So let's take a look. So yo hablé con mis amigos ayer. And ayer is one of those little words that we were talking about, means yesterday. Okay? So I spoke with my friends yesterday. Mi hermana compró un billete. Ellos escribieron una carta a su profesora. ¿A qué hora comiste tú la cena? Yo viví en Paraguay. Nosotros empezamos a las 12. Él pagó 1,500 pesos. Ellas comprendieron bien. Tú preparaste la comida. Tú y yo bebimos café. Always to talk about actions that have taken place in the past. Bien. Part number 2, if you see it up in the corner here. Part number 2, we're cruising right along. Part number 2 is something I like to call car, gar, zar. And this is a big, fancy, crazy page, and I'm sorry it's so messy now that I look at it. So this is referring to verbs that end in car, gar, or zar. And I'm giving to you some examples here. Some examples of car verbs are tocar, comunicar, practicar. Gar verbs be pagar, llegar, jugar. Zar verbs be comenzar, empezar, almorzar. And the only one I think you might not know is almorzar, which means to eat lunch. So down there below is sort of the concept about why I've pulled this out as something that's different than just the normal. Okay, you know AR verbs end in right? Because that's the ending for conjugations for AR verbs. But they do something weird with CAR, GAR, and ZAR endings. Only the yo form is weird. The rest is all normal. So you see down below, I've given you a heads up about what that is. So car verbs will go to que, Q-U-E endings. GAR verbs will go to ge, G-U-E endings. And ZAR verbs go to se, the C-E endings. Let's take a look at some examples and see how this works in practice. So yo almorcé, en el cual almorcé comes from almorzar, and you can see the CE ending. Yo empecé la tarea. So these are ZAR ones, right? Okay. Yo empecé la tarea a las 11. Okay. And you have your GARs over here. Okay. So you got yo llegué, GUE, yo pagué, GUE. Llegué tarde a la clase, yo pagué 1,100 pesos. And then you have the CARs, right? You have yo toqué la guitarra en la mañana, yo practiqué el polo acuático, and here your CARs. So hopefully that makes sense. It's only in the yo form, not the other forms. They're not weird. Okay? Continuing. The third section of this format, of this new verb tense that we're talking about, are stem changes. And we talked about this in the present tense, but they're different in the past. They're very different. So generally speaking, if something is a stem changer in the present, it's not doing the same thing in the past. So for example, a verb like empezar in the present would be like empiezo, right? It's an E to I-E. But in the past, it doesn't, that goes away. There is no stem change, right? So let's actually just go ahead and erase that, because that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here are certain other types of stem changes that happen. There's an O to a U and an E to an I. Let's see how it works. So O to U would be something like dormir. So dormir means to sleep. Okay, and I've highlighted with the sort of orangey color where it changes. It's normal all the way through except in two places. Right? It's not normal in the el-ella form, and it's not normal in the ellos form. And anything that's a stem changer in the pretérito is only going to change in those two forms, the el-ella usted form and the ellos-ellas ustedes form. And you can see here it goes from O to U, and the way we say that is durmió and durmieron. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And then E to I, the same thing sort of happens. And here I've given you three verbs that do that: pedir, repetir, and servir, with our example being servir. So we have serví, serviste, sirvió. So you can see it happens again in the same spot. And sirvieron. It only happens in the el, ella, and ellos, ellas forms. Let's see some examples. Okay, so some ejemplos are ella pidió. You can see it changed to the I there. Un billete para Guadalajara. If you didn't know, pedir means to ask for or to order. Pidió un billete para Guadalajara. Ellos sirvieron pastel en la fiesta. They served cake at the party. And los estudiantes durmieron durante la clase. So you can see some examples of how that's put into practice. Please feel free to go back and check through these and to practice. We're going to get a lot more practice with this in class through the week, particularly beginning with not all those crazy stuff, but just your basic AR, haste, o, amos, aron, ER, iste, yo, imos, ieron, and IR, iste, yo, imos, ieron. The other stuff will also come in through time, and I want us to have that in our belt. But the main thing right now is for us to get the basic concept of the pretérito down. Muchas gracias por mirar. I know this was a little bit of a longer video, but I tried to still keep it short so that you could get on to the other things that you need to do in your busy lives. Muchas gracias y nos veremos mañana en clase. Hasta luego.